Hare Krishna, ISKCON Chennai welcomes you to day 5 of Srimad Bhagavatam session. Today we are going to narrate the story of Dhruva Maharaj. Before that, we shall pay obeisances to the Lord and Srimad Bhagavatam by chanting the following prayers. So you all can chant along with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर् भवति नैष्टकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्दा श्री अद्वैत गदाधारा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृन्दा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa were advised by Lord Brahma to procreate. They had 5 children, 2 sons and 3 daughters. Priyavrata and Uttanapada were the 2 sons of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa, and the 3 daughters were Akuti, Prasuti, and Devahuti. Priyavrata was not interested in the material world, and hence he left to the forest in search of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Uttanapada was crowned the king after Swayambhuva Manu, and he married 2 queens. One was Suniti and one was Suruchi. Suniti's son was named Dhruva and Suruchi's son was named Uttama. Both the queens were very beautiful, but somehow Uttanapada always favored his younger queen Suruchi. Once, when King Uttanapada was sitting on the throne, he lifted his son Uttama and was patting him fondly. Dhruva, who saw this, also wanted to be patted by his father and was trying to climb on his lap. But Uttanapada did not make any attempt to lift Dhruva on his lap because he did not want to offend his favorite queen, Suruchi. Suruchi, realizing this very proudly, she tells Dhruva, "My dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. If you want to sit on the lap of the king or on the throne, you should be born of my womb and not from the womb of another woman. And you have to perform severe austerities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when he is satisfied, you ask him for the benediction of being born in my womb, and then you will be able to sit on your father's lap." Indirectly, Suruchi was telling that Dhruva should die and take a new body. She was very envious of Dhruva. Dhruva, till then, he did not see any difference between his mother Suniti and Suruchi, but by her harsh speech, he could realize the difference. And Maitreya, who is narrating this story to Vidura, is telling him that just as when a snake is hit by a stick, it breathes heavily, so also Dhruva started to breathe heavily, being hit by the harsh words of his stepmother Suruchi. He began to cry and, breathing heavily, he went running to his mother's chambers. Now, Vidura was also in a similar condition. Vidura, when he was advising Dhritarashtra to part with the kingdom to part with the rightful share to the Pandavas, Duryodhana got so annoyed and he started abusing him, and he said that he should be thrown out of the kingdom with only his breath left. Vidura was so shocked to hear such words from his nephew that he looked at his brother, and his brother seemed to say nothing. He felt so betrayed that he left the palace by keeping the bow at the door of the palace and set out on pilgrimage. But Vidura was wise enough to understand that this was the work of the material energy, and Duryodhana was speaking under the influence of this material energy and was proceeding towards ruination. And he also knew that the Supreme Lord was helping him. Vidura was not very fond of opulences of the palace, and he was only too glad to leave the palace, and he set out on a pilgrimage. And that is how, when he went to Haridwar, he met this great sage Maitreya, who was narrating now the Srimad Bhagavatam to Vidura. Maitreya wanted to narrate Dhruva's pious activities to Vidura, and he was hence narrating this story. Now, Dhruva was only a child of 5 years old, and he could not understand that this is the work of the illusory energy. And he went running to his mother, breathing very heavily and not able to speak anything. His mother, seeing this condition of Dhruva, did not understand what was wrong with him, and she took him immediately on his lap. But the residents of the palace, they narrated to Suniti what happened in Uttanapada's palace. Suniti's lotus face withered, and she too started weeping. She was wondering how to find a practical solution in this painful situation. She did not know what to do. But then she told him, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for anyone. Anyone who inflicts pain others or upon others suffers himself from that pain." So nicely, she is teaching him the law of karma, that for every action there will be a reaction. So she's telling him, don't inflict pain on others, because then even you will suffer from pain. She gives him very good advice. And Suniti's advice is very famous, and it is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam for all to read. She tells him that though your stepmother, Suruchi, spoke harsh words, they are factual. If you want to share the throne with Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately follow your stepmother's instructions, and without any delay surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She tells him that his great grandfather Brahmaji, he acquired the necessary qualification of creation by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, and his grandfather Swayambhuva Manu achieved great success in material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation due to the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So she says, I cannot think of anyone else who can give you shelter, who can be merciful towards you. So you surrender to the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Then she advises him that if one executes one's allotted occupation and situate oneself in the personality of Godhead in your heart, that is when one executes one's allotted duties and keeps the Supreme Personality and thinks of the Supreme Personality in one's heart, then without deviating for a moment, engage always in the service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is there in everyone's heart. So she tells him that you should execute the allotted duty by thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the heart and engage always in his service. She also tells him that Brahma, he seeks the pleasure of the goddess of fortune, but the goddess of fortune herself, with lotus flower in her hand, is always ready to render service to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So she tries to explain to him that none other than the Supreme Lord can help him. Dhruva, he was pondering over his mother's words. He was deliberating over it, and he decided to leave the palace to the forest. Without informing anyone, he leaves for the forest. Now, Narada Muni, who understands Dhruva's activities, he immediately approaches to meet the little boy. How did Narada Muni know that Dhruva was approaching the forest? Because Narada Muni was not there when all these events took place in the palace. But Narada Muni is a Trikalagnya. How this can be understood? Trikalagnya means he knows the past, the present, and the future. How can this be understood? The Supreme Lord is in everybody's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto means he is present in every living entity's heart. So, when he understands that a living entity is serious about entering devotional service, he sends his representative, and in this case, it was Narada Muni whom he sent to meet Dhruva Maharaj. Narada Muni wanted to test how determined Dhruva was. He meets him and he touches his head and he tells him, "You are only a 5 year old boy, so you go back home and you play with the toys and your friends. This is not the place for children. The forest has a lot of wild animals. When you grow older, you can come back and meditate on the Lord." But he saw that Dhruva was very adamant. He was very much determined to meditate on the Supreme Lord. And Narada Muni was surprised as to how wonderful and powerful the Kshatriyas are. They cannot tolerate even a small infringement on their honor. Just imagine this boy is only 5 years old and his stepmother's harsh words have proved unbearable to him. Now, the advice which Suniti had given Dhruva, the same advice was given by Lord Krishna also to Arjuna. When Arjuna was hesitant to fight, Krishna also tells him the same thing, that when you fight, you think of me and you fight. The same way, Suniti, she says, you execute your allotted duties by thinking of the Supreme Lord. Now, how do we do that? How do we execute the allotted duties by thinking of the Supreme Lord? While we are doing our duty, we should think of the Supreme Lord by chanting His holy names and by reciting the prayers known to us. But if we are working in an office, how can we do that? So, before we start the work, pray to the Supreme Lord, and after we finish the work, we offer the results of the work to the Lord. There was this one person who was working in a very big public institution and he held a very high position. He always used to read the Bhagavad Gita and then he used to go to the office. He was a very sincere, humble, straightforward person and he did his duty perfectly. But his colleagues were uncomfortable with him because they were corrupt and they could not follow their corrupt practices because of his presence. So they always thought of various ways of sending him away from there. And they used the influence to keep transferring from one place to another. Almost he has traveled all over India to all the places. And the most abominable place he was transferred, where no one even would desire to go and work over there. But he took it up as a challenge and he went everywhere and set things right. After his retirement, he very happily retired. He had no regrets at all. And he was known to everybody as being a straightforward person. And even the people who interviewed him on TV, they asked him that what was the secret of his success. He said, I don't think I have done anything special. What I do is, sincerely, I always recite the Bhagavad Gita before I leave for office and then I go to work. So then she asks, but you have been transferred so many times and people talk of it as punishment transfers. So what do you say about it? He says, I never thought of it as a punishment transfer. They must have thought of it as a punishment transfer, but I always thought of it as a challenge which was given to me and I executed it to the perfect T. He said wherever he went, the conditions were so miserable, the working conditions were so miserable that he improved all the working conditions and he set right all the mistakes in that particular site. And even the employees were so happy with him. It is only the colleagues of his own rank that who did not like him because they could not follow their corrupt practices. So, in this way, when we are allotted our particular duty in this world, in this material world, we should execute it with honesty and sincerity and thinking of the Lord. Definitely, the Supreme Lord helps. So now Narada is advising the child. He is saying, now you have to go back. And he's surprised at the Kshatriya quality of the child. The Kshatriyas, they get angry very fast. So he is very surprised looking at this young child who's so angry after hearing his mother's harsh words. So he tells him, this is not the place for you. You go back. And he gives him a lot of advice. He tells that all this honor and dishonor are both destined only by one's previous actions. And you should not worry about it because this is all because of the illusory energy of the Lord. We have uh, behaved in a particular way, or we have, uh, what to say, acted in such a way in our previous lives that when we are in a particular situation, we should learn to accept the honor and dishonor, thinking that yes, this is the result of our previous action. Now, it is very difficult for people to understand this. Now, when a person is ignorant about the scriptures, he will wonder, like, why am I suffering? What harm have I done to anyone? Why am I suffering? Like how now Dhruva is in this condition, Dhruva is a child, but we grown ups, we think so many times that what have I done to suffer like this? So there's a small story. In a village, there was a very rich man who was a very sinful man, but he enjoyed all the material things and he was leading a very comfortable life. And there was a poor man, very poor, a pious man who could barely get one square meal a day, and he was always suffering due to some problem or the other. The people in the village also used to wonder that this man is so pious and so religious, he never harms anybody, he's always out to help somebody, and he is suffering like this. And this sinful man, he is leading a life without any difficulty. So they were all perplexed. Once the entire village decided to go on a pilgrimage, and this rich man, as usual, had a comfortable ride on a palanquin, and this this poor man, he was following the palanquin by walking behind them. It so happened while he was walking, there was a big thorn which pierced through his foot, from the sole of his foot to the upper part of the foot, and he was struggling to take out the thorn. Another villager who was watching this, he asked the astrologer who was walking along with him. He's saying, "See, we have seen always this person who is so nice, he's suffering so much. And that person, he's always so sinful and he is not having any problem. What is the reason for this?" So the astrologer, he tells that in the previous life, the rich man, he had performed so many austerities and he had done a lot of charity, but because he should have been born as a king, but because of his sinful activities in this present life, he is only a rich man in this village. Whereas this man who's doing pious activities, because of his abominable activities in his previous life, he should have lost his leg by this time. But because of his pious activities, the pious activities has protected him, and he has only received a thorn on his foot. So this is how we enjoy the actions of our previous life. Narada also says that we get different varieties of body according to our desires and actions. So, what are the different types of bodies one gets? The Padma Puran mentions there are 84 lakhs of species of living entities. Jalaja Navalakshana, that is, there are 9 lakhs of living entities in water. Sthavaram Laksha Vimshati, 20 lakhs of non moving living entities like the plants and the creepers. Krimaya Rudra Sankhya, there are 11 lakhs of varieties of reptiles and worms, insects. Pakshinam Dasha Lakshanam, there are 10 like varieties of birds. Trimsa Lakshana Pashavaha, that is, there are 30 lakhs of quadrupeds, four-legged animals. And lastly, Chatur Lakshani Manushara, 4 lakhs of human species. Now, this 84 lakhs of human species are right from Brahma Lok, the topmost planet, to the lowermost planet, the Patal Lok. So, just as the air moves from below to the higher, to the sky, the same manner, the person, the living entity, keeps changing bodies right from the lowest to the highest, and it keeps moving up and down in this planetary system. So, this is what Narada is explaining, and he is telling that in whatever situation we find in, we should not complain because all this is due to our past deeds. He further explains to him that how a person should live. He says, when a person meets another person who is superior in knowledge to him, then he should pay obeisances to him, be happy, and he should learn from him. And if he meets someone who is inferior to him, then he should be compassionate to him and try to take out his ignorance and try to educate him. And if he meets someone who is equal to him, then he should be happy spending time with him. But all the material tribulations happens because of what is happening the other way. A person who sees if another person is superior to him, he either feels envious of him or he is depressed seeing that someone is superior to him. And if he sees someone who is inferior to him, then he tries to be condescending towards him. He treats him very badly. And if he meets someone equal to him, then he tries to brag about his achievements. So these are all the causes of the material tribulations which we see. We do not know how to live. So we are all in ignorance. So this is what Narada Muni is telling Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, who's been listening to everything, he says, I appreciate your good advice, but I cannot understand any of this because now I am covered with ignorance. He says, nothing enters my heart. My heart has been pierced by the harsh words of my stepmother, Suruchi, and whatever good advice you give me is not entering my heart. So he says, I want a goal. I want a kingdom which is greater than my father, Uttanapada, greater than my grandfather, Swayambhuva Manu, and greater than my great grandfather, Brahmaji. So if you are able to help me, then you kindly advise me the honest path to follow by which I can achieve the goal of my life. So here we have to note that Dhruva, his goal is very ambitious, but he does not resort to crooked ways of acquiring it. He asks Narada, if you really want to oblige, if you really want to help me, then you show me the honest path to achieve my goal. Narada Muni is very happy and he sees how determined the boy is. He tells him, okay, there is a forest called Madhuvan at the banks of the Yamuna. You go there and you meditate as per my instructions. And he gives him the instructions as to how he should worship the Supreme Lord. He teaches him the eightfold yoga system, which is known as Ashtanga Yoga. He teaches him pranayama so that he can meditate on the Lord by controlling his breath and stop his oscillating mind. And then he also tells him to make a deity of the Lord with whatever materials available in the forest. So, in the forest, earth and mud is available. He advises Dhruva to make a deity of the Lord and to offer whatever paraphernalia which is available in the forest, like fruits, flowers, leaves, buds, and water from the Yamuna, and especially Tulsi leaves. And then he describes to him about the Lord. First, he gives him the 12 syllable mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So he instructs Dhruva to chant the mantra, to offer worship to the Lord, and to do Ashtanga Yoga. Dhruva, after listening to the advice of Narada Muni, further describes the beauty of the Lord. On what form of the Lord Dhruva should concentrate. So he explains the beauty of the Lord. He tells him the Lord is very beautiful to look at, very charming. He's got very beautiful eyes, nose, and lips. His eyes and lips, they have the color of the rising sun. They are as pink as the color of the rising sun. He says he wears very beautiful shark shaped earrings in his ears. He wears very beautiful jewelry on his neck, bracelets, and anklets. He wears a crown which is studded with precious stones, and he wears a Kaustuba money on his neck. He wears silk garments, that is, shining yellow silken garments, and which is supported by a belt, golden belt on the waist. He says the Lord's bodily hue is deep bluish in color, and he has got well formed limbs. He says the Lord has got a very, very beautiful smile. He describes the Lord thus, and he asks Dhruva to follow his instructions. Dhruva, thus advised by the great sage, he circumambulated Narada and offered him respectful obeisances and then left for Madhuvan. After he left for Madhuvan, Narada wanted to go and see what happened to Uttanapada. He wanted to know how Uttanapada was faring. So he goes to Uttanapada. When he sees Uttanapada, he finds that Uttanapada is totally devastated. He has regretted his action towards his son Dhruva. Sometimes in our life too, we take a particular decision and then we regret about it later. This was what happened to Uttanapada. He regretted being attracted to his beautiful wife and thereby ignoring his little 5-year-old son who left the palace. And he was so aggrieved he did not know what to do. He invited Narada and asked him about the whereabouts of his son. Narada told him that you do not worry about your son. And Uttanapada was wondering that how can he amend his actions. So Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita also asks Krishna, Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushah anishan api varshneya baladiva niyojitah. O son, O descendant of Vrishni, why is that one is impelled to do sinful acts as if engaged by force? So the Lord replies, Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudbhavah mahashano mahapapma vidyena miha vairinam. He says it is lust only, Arjuna, which is the all devouring enemy of the world. So, lust, when you desire for something very strongly and you do not get it, you get angry, and in anger, you don't know what action you perform. So, Uttanapada, he was attracted to his wife, but Dhruva, his lust was what? To gain a greater kingdom than his great grandfather. So, lust does not mean only attraction for the bodily concept, but lust also means any strong desire to achieve anything. We can practically see in this world when someone wants something very badly and the person does not get it, then he gets so angry and then he loses all reason. This is what happens when you do not want to act, but you are acting forcefully. It is because of lust only, as the Lord tells Arjuna. So Suniti, she was very wise and noble. She dovetailed Dhruva's anger into devotion to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She first advised him not to harm anybody, and then she told him, whatever you want, whatever goal you want to achieve, you approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead for it. Now, the king was so regretful of his behavior, and he is telling Narada Muni that what will my 5-year-old son do in the forest? There are so many wild animals. He is not used to the forest life. He's been brought up in a palace. Where will he sleep? What will he eat? In this way, in this manner, he's ranting about his son. Narada Muni tells him, your son has already become famous in the other upper planetary system for his achievement of goal. He will definitely achieve what the great kings and sages have not achieved in so many lifetimes. Your son will definitely achieve that and he will return back to you successfully. You do not worry. He is being protected by the Supreme Lord himself in the forest, so nothing will happen to your son. Despite the assurance given by Narada Muni that the Lord is protecting his son, he could not rule the kingdom. His mind was always thinking of his son Dhruva. He was unable to carry out the duties in his kingdom. Now, in the Madhuvana forest, what happens? Dhruva is following the instructions of Narada Muni very sincerely, and his diet on the first month is only fruits and berries on every third day. That is, every third day is having only fruits and berries. Then in the second month, he's having only dry grass and leaves on every sixth day. Third month, he drinks only water once in every 9 days and he is gone into trance. The fourth month, sorry, it was the first month he's eating only fruits and berries. The second month he's eating dry grass and leaves. The third month he drinks water only every 9 days. And the fourth month he's inhaling air only every 12th day, completely fixed in his position. Now he has become successful in his pranayama. He is able to control the breath. So he's breathing once in 12 days. Then the fifth month, he stands only on one leg like a pillar and he is immovable. Being thus, Dhruva suddenly captures the Supreme Lord within his heart, who is the refuge of the entire material creation and who is the master of all living entities. The three words begin to tremble. The Supreme Personality, who is the refuge of the entire material creation, is now within Dhruva's heart. Dhruva is totally engrossed in meditation, and now he has begun to control his breath. He starts to close all the pores of his body and all the holes of his body, and he is meditating on the Lord. Now, since he has the Lord within his heart, the entire material creation is getting suffocated because of Dhruva, because he's controlling the breath and he has covered all the holes. The Devatas from all the upper planetary systems, they go running to Lord Vishnu and they ask, what is this? We are unable to breathe. And Lord Vishnu, he says, do not worry, this is my child devotee Dhruva who is performing severe austerity. I will go and stop his austerity. You can go back to your respective abodes. The Devatas, they return back to their respective abodes. And the Lord, he immediately mounts on his Garuda and he comes to Madhuvan to meet Dhruva. Now, Dhruva was totally concentrating on the effulgent form of the Lord within his heart. He was so engrossed at looking at the Lord within his heart that when suddenly the Lord disappeared from his heart, he got bewildered and he opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he saw the Supreme Lord standing right in front of him, just as he had seen him within his heart. Dhruva, he paid obeisances to the Lord. He fell down like a rod. He gave Dandavat pranams. He fell down like a rod at the Lord's feet. And he could not speak anything because of the sudden appearance of the Lord in front of his eyes. Looking at his awkward position, the Supreme Lord touched his forehead with his conch shell, and immediately Dhruva was empowered to recite prayers from the Vedas very fluently. Now, these prayers you will find in the Srimad Bhagavatam. After he glorifies the Lord, Lord Vishnu, he tells him, I am pleased with your austerity, and I also know the wish you have in your heart. Your desire is very ambitious. You want a greater kingdom than Brahmaji. I shall award you that. He says, I shall award you the glowing planet known as a pole star, which we call as Dhruvalok, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution at the end of the millennium. He says no one has ever ruled this planet, which is surrounded by all the solar systems, planets, and stars. So the Lord is so pleased by Dhruva that he gives him material opulences also. And he also tells him that he will give him the Dhruva planet, the pole star, which is one of the Vaikuntha planets, which will continue to exist even after the dissolution. So, what was the material opulence? He says that Dhruva would rule the kingdom for 36,000 years after his father retires to the forest. And the spiritual thing he got was a permanent residence in the pole star, which no one has ever attained, even after so many births of doing pious activities to the Lord. So the Lord tells him that he would rule the kingdom for 36,000 years. And he says, after he finishes his duties over here, he will come back to Vaikuntha, the pole star, where he would be eternally with the Lord. After saying this, the Lord blessed him and he left for the Vaikuntha abode. Now Maitreya is telling Vidura that after the Lord granted him his ambitious goal, Vidura was unhappy. Dhruva was very unhappy. Why was he unhappy? That was what Vidura asks. Why was Dhruva unhappy? He got what he wanted. He achieved the Vaikuntha Loka in this very birth itself. Whereas great sages, after many, many births, also they do not get the Vaikuntha planet. So why was Dhruva unhappy? So Maitreya is explaining Dhruva's mental status. He's telling him how Dhruva thought. Dhruva thought, alas, just look at me, I am so unfortunate. I approach the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can immediately cut the chain of the repetition of birth and death. But still, out of my foolishness, I prayed for things that are perishable. So that is what we do in this material world. Instead of asking for relief from the repeated cycle of birth and death, we asked for many material things. So this Dhruva is comparing to in the next shloka. Because of my state of complete foolishness and paucity of pious activities, although the Lord offered me his personal service, I wanted material name, fame, and prosperity. My case is just like that of the poor man who, when he satisfied a great emperor, who wanted to give him anything he might ask out of ignorance, asked only a few broken grains of rice. So, this is our position also in this world. We think of the immediate enjoyment. We do not think of the long term enjoyment. This is called Shreyas and Prayas. Prayas is you get something and you enjoy now, but then in the long run, you suffer. Whereas Shreyas, you may suffer in the beginning, but in the long run, you enjoy. So, for example, we ask for some material thing in this world and we enjoy it at present. But what happens? We are asking for enjoyment in this material world and we are performing actions and reactions, and again we'll be getting another body and we'll be again and again take birth, we'll be taking birth in this material world. So we will be suffering actually in the long run. Whereas if we ask for devotional service from the Lord, in the beginning it may be very difficult for us. We may think, oh, what am I going to gain materially? But by doing devotional service to the Lord, we will not be in this material world. In the long run, the Lord says that when you think of me at the time of death, when you do devotional service to me seriously, when you always think of me, I will take you to my abode. He gives a guarantee. So, Shreyas, that is the long term benefit. So, we should always follow the path of Shreyas and not prayers. This is what we are doing, and that is what Dhruva is also regretting, that he asked for something which is perishable. Now Dhruva leaves the forest to go back home. Now that Dhruva is returning back to the palace, a messenger he gives this information to the king, and King Uttanapada is so happy. He comes running. He arranges for all the palanquins to be ready to take him, to take his queen to the forest and welcome Dhruva. The entire palace, the entire kingdom is decorated, and the details of this decoration is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Uttanapada is so eager to meet his son, and when he approaches the forest, he looks at his son and runs to hug him, and torrents of tears flow from his eyes. But he realizes that his son is a changed person. It is not the same 5-year-old child who left the palace to the forest. Now, this was a self realized soul, and he could understand the difference when he embraced the child. Dhruva then he saw his mother Suruchi and paid obeisances to her. She immediately clasped him in her embrace and she told him, "Long live my child." This was the same woman who first wanted him to die and take birth in a womb. Now she is blessing him for a long life. Suniti, when she saw her son, who was part and parcel of her body, was so happy that she hugged him and she forgot all the grief and suffering she had endured during the last 6 months. So no one had any enmity towards anyone. Dhruva was in fact thankful to his stepmother Suruchi. It is because of her harsh words that he set out to the forest and he met his spiritual master Narada Muni and he attained the Supreme Lord's darshan. So Dhruva had no negative feelings towards anybody, and time passed by. Dhruva was growing, and Uttanapada he saw by Dhruva's behavior that he was fit to rule the kingdom, and he consulted all his ministers who totally agreed with him that Dhruva should rule the kingdom. He enthroned Dhruva and he entered the forest. Now Dhruva ruled the kingdom very wisely. He treated the citizens of his kingdom like his own children, and even the citizens of the kingdom loved Dhruva like anything. So one day, what happened was Uttama he went to the forest for hunting, and while he was hunting, a yaksha he killed Uttama. Suruchi she went in search of Uttama in the forest, and she also died in the forest fire. Dhruva, when he heard this, he was very angry. He thought, how could a yaksha unjustly kill my brother? And he mounted a chariot and went to attack the yakshas. Now, the yakshas are very tricky people. They use all sorts of tricks to attack. But they also knew about Dhruva Maharaj's greatness and his ability to fight. They all attacked him at once. Dhruva Maharaj had gone to fight with them all alone. They all attacked with him at once. And he retaliated with the barrage of arrows from his quiver. At a particular moment, they covered Dhruva entirely with arrows, and even the demigods from heaven they thought, Alas, the son of Uttanapada is finished. But just as the sun emerges from behind the clouds, Uttanapada he emerged from the pile of arrows and he began to attack them mercilessly. And he killed so many of them that those who were left they ran away, fearing for their life. But Dhruva was not satisfied. He knew that these yakshas they definitely will conjure up some tricks to attack again. So he was waiting there, and exactly as he predicted, the sky became so dark, and then it began to rain pus, blood, urine, arrows, and poisonous snakes. The sages who were there around they immediately came running to Dhruva and they advised him to use his Narayan Astra. They say, You are a great devotee of Lord Narayan, so use the arrow given by Narayan Rishi, everything will be over. Dhruva he meditated on Narayan Rishi and he placed the Narayan Astra on the bow. The moment he placed it, all these illusions they just vanished. Then Dhruva, what he did, he went to Alkapuri, the abode of the Yakshas. The Yakshas are under the protection of Kubera. So he went there to attack and he started attacking. When Swayambhuva Manu, his grandfather, and great sages, they all came from their respective homes and they advised Dhruva to stop fighting. Swayambhuva Manu said, Enough, you have avenged your brother. The person, the Yaksha who killed your brother, is already dead. So don't continue fighting and kill other innocent Yakshas who are not responsible for your brother's death. And you stop this fighting. He says, With great difficulty, you have achieved the mercy of the Lord at the age of 5. So don't give up all this just because of anger. You stop fighting immediately. Dhruva immediately paid obeisances to his grandfather and he said he would stop fighting. Swayambhuva Manu and the sages they returned back to their respective homes. Kubera appeared before Dhruva and he was happy with Dhruva's decision to stop fighting. Dhruva paid his obeisances to Kubera and Kubera told him that he could ask for any boon. Dhruva said, I do not want anything. I just want that I should always remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord 24 hours of the day. And Kubera granted him the boon and disappeared from his sight. Dhruva then went back to his palace and he ruled the kingdom for 36,000 years. After 36,000 years, meanwhile, he married and he had two sons. He, with the consultation, with the advice from his ministers, he placed them on the throne, and he left for the forest in Badrikashrama, which is in the Himalayas, and he started to do practice penances and austerities, just as he was taught by Narada Muni when he was 5 years old. In Badrikashrama, his senses became completely purified. He concentrated his mind on the Archa Vigraha of the Lord and entered in complete trance. So he was not aware of his bodily existence. At that time, he saw an airplane coming from the sky whose effulgence spread throughout Badrikashram. And then he saw two very beautiful associates of Lord Vishnu, Nanda and Sunanda, in the plane. They had 4 hands and a blackish bodily luster. They were youthful and their eyes were just like the reddish lotus flowers. The residents of Vaikuntha do look exactly like what Lord Vishnu. The only difference is Lord Vishnu has the Srivatsa mark on his chest. So these two residents, Nanda and Sunanda, they approached Dhruva and they told him that they were deputed to take him back to Godhead. Dhruva, on hearing this, immediately takes bath in the Alaknanda river and dresses him nicely because he's going to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He finishes all his spiritual practices, then he pays obeisances to all the sages present there. Now he was a very humble person. The airplane did not come to take the sages to Vaikuntha, but it came to take Dhruva to Vaikuntha. But still, Dhruva was such a humble person that he respected all the devotees. He paid obeisances to them and he was about to board the spiritual plane. When he was about to board the spiritual plane, death personified appeared in front of him. Dhruva was not afraid of death. In fact, because of his spiritual practices, his body had already turned spiritual. And death personified, he had heard of the greatness of Dhruva Maharaj, how at the age of 5 he acquired the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Lordhead, and he paid obeisances to Dhruva. Dhruva took his chance and kept his foot on Death Personified's head and boarded the plane. As he sat on the plane, he remembered his mother Suniti because she was the one who gave him good advice to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he was wondering, how can I go to the spiritual planet, to Vaikuntha, leaving my poor mother behind? She was the first one who gave him the instruction on how to achieve the favor of the Lord. While he was thinking thus, Nanda and Sunanda, they could understand of what was going on in his mind, and they brought his attention to another transcendental plane which was going ahead of him, and he saw that his mother was seated on the plane. She was also going to the Vaikuntha planet. So Falashruti, thus Maitreya, he concluded. He concluded the story of Dhruva, and he tells him, I have explained to you the great reputation of the character of Dhruva Maharaj. Great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj and his activities. So, what is the benefit of hearing the story of Dhruva Maharaj? That also is been given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is the benefit. Falashruti means benefit. So, by hearing the narration of Dhruva Maharaj, one can fulfill desires for wealth, reputation, and increased duration of life. It is so auspicious that one can even go to a heavenly planet or attain Dhruva Loka. One attains the pure devotional platform and executes pure devotional service. One acquires greatness, prowess, or influence. So, these are the benefits of listening to Dhruva Maharaj's story. You can contact this number for ISKCON Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam in any language you want. I pay my respectful obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, who has translated all the literatures from Sanskrit and Bengali to English, and from English to several other languages. It has been translated. Each and every person can take the benefit of the books of Srila Prabhupada. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, now Dhruva Maharaj's story was in Satya Yuga. In Kali Yuga, it is not possible for any individual entity, any living entity to perform such severe austerities. And that is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us the simplest way of doing devotional service to the Lord. And that is, he explains to us the Yuga Dharma of this Kali Yuga is chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So he says, you chant the holy names of the Lord, you read the Bhagavad Gita, you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this will help you attain the devotional service and you can go to the Lord's abode. This was the same instruction given by Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. He says, this Kali Yuga is full of faults. We keep saying Kali Yuga is full of faults, full of faults. But Shukadev Goswami says, Kale dosha nidhe rajan asti heka mahan gunaha. That is, Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, but there is one mahagunaha. There is one very nice quality about this Kali Yuga. And what is that? Kirtanad eva Krishnasya mukta sangha param vrachet. And what is that good quality? Kirtanad eva Krishnasya. Kirtanad eva Krishnasya means by chanting the holy names of Lord Krishna always. Mukta Sangha Param Vrajit. What will happen? You will achieve the supreme abode, the transcendental abode of Lord Krishna. So let us all chant the holy names of Sri Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you.